And more about the North Korean involvement and its global implications, we will ask Mr. Peter Dickinson, editor of the UkraineAlert blog at the Eurasia Center of Atlantic Council and the publisher of Business Ukraine and Lviv Today magazines. Greetings, Peter.
Hello.
Hello. So the question remains. Volodymyr Zelensky has slammed the Western allies of Ukraine for zero reaction, as I quote, to North Korean military involvement in the war against Ukraine. And we are hearing right now that North Korean troops are being deployed to Kursk Oblast and to the front line right now. What do you think about that?
Well, I think what we're seeing now is a test for the West. I think Putin is testing the West's reaction to see what kind of response they have to the involvement of foreign soldiers in the Russian invasion. So at this stage, we're talking about maybe 10,000 North Korean troops. But of course, if Putin feels that there's been no major response, that there's been no major negative consequences for the use of North Korean soldiers, it seems very likely that we'll see a lot more soldiers, that then he'll say, okay, this is a way to solve my manpower problems, Russia's manpower problems. I will now, instead of using 10,000 North Korean troops, let's talk about maybe 100,000 North Korean troops. This is certainly what I think we should expect to see in the coming months if the West doesn't respond promptly and far more forcefully than what we've seen over the last 2 weeks. So it's a test at the moment, and at the moment the West is failing that test.
Happen if this will be allowed? The deployment of 10,000 and 100,000 Korean troops to Ukraine. Do you see that a game changer for the war itself? And if it is a game changer, shouldn't be there a back reaction from our allies?
It's certainly a game changer. It's certainly going to transform the war, and it transforms Russian aggression as well. It means that Russian aggression, clearly North Korea has no issue in Ukraine, has no role in this war other than as Russia's ally. North Korea and Ukraine have no conflicts, no areas of competition, no areas where they could come into any form of conflict. So this is purely North Korea joining Russia's war in Ukraine. Now, if North Korea is prepared to do that, perhaps it will be prepared to join other Russian military adventures, perhaps the conquest of other countries, perhaps military operations in Moldova, in Poland, in the Baltic states against Finland, perhaps in Central Asia, perhaps in the Caucasus. There are many areas where Russia could use North Korean soldiers. North Korea has one of the largest standing armies in the whole world. They have more than 1 million soldiers, which is a far larger number than any other country can bring to the table. So the resource base here for Russia to draw on is huge. It could significantly increase Russia's military strength. Now, of course, Russia's tactics in Ukraine are very, very intensive. They have a high level of losses. They are basically using large numbers of troops to push forward, to overwhelm Ukraine's defences. A lot of the troops they are using are not very well trained. Russia's most experienced military force, most experienced officers, commanders, and for that matter, troops are long gone. They've been already lost in the first 2.5 years of the invasion. So Russia is now very reliant on these human wave tactics, throwing men forward to take land and to hold it. Now, North Korean troops should be more or less as effective in that role as Russian troops, untrained Russian troops, Russian conscripts, mobilized Russians. So the potential for Russia to use these troops elsewhere is significant. It will give them an edge in Ukraine. It could allow Russia to launch other military operations. And then the other side of this equation is what North Korea is getting from this, which is also crucial for the West. North Korea is clearly not doing this out of any sense of charity or kinship or support for Russia. They're doing this because it's very good for North Korea. This allows North Korea to acquire, we are led to believe from information that's been released by South Korea, that North Korea is receiving quite a lot of money, as you would expect. North Korea is receiving material aid in the form of food supplies. So those are things that are very useful for North Korea. But crucially, what North Korea is also receiving is military technologies. They're receiving missile technologies, nuclear technologies. Now, these are areas that North Korea has been pushing for a long, long time to try and gain. And if it's gaining those materials now, that technological know-how from Russia, that will be something they will look to use as well. So that will create a whole range of challenges for security in the Asia Pacific region. So this is how there are very global implications for what we're seeing now happening in Ukraine.
Well, that's obviously looking for me as a beginning of World War III, if you pardon my frankness, because the resources of North Korean army and Russian technologies and equipment will allow really them to launch different operations. Don't you see that NATO as a defensive alliance must act right now, at this moment, preparing for the war, probably a defensive one, but what we are seeing is deep concerns. How long is that gonna last, those concerns, before the real threat is at the door, or is it still possible for world institutions to rally before it's too late at this moment?
Well, it's always possible and it's never too late, I would say, but it's certainly late. What we're seeing now is a major escalation in the war. It's a watershed moment, really, for 21st century history, European history. We're seeing, for the first time ever, we're seeing North Korean soldiers waging war in Europe. That's never happened before, and that's now happening. That's now taking place. We have North Korean soldiers on the battlefields of Europe fighting in a war of an invasion, an aggressive imperial invasion, a war of aggression in Europe. Clearly, that is pretty alarming, and that's unprecedented stuff. We've never seen that before, and that's been possible, and it is possible today because the West has adopted a policy of escalation management towards the war in Ukraine, where they've been very reluctant to arm Ukraine, very reluctant to provoke Russia, and have been constantly looking to try and de-escalate and do whatever they can to reduce tensions and to show Russia that they're not ready for a confrontation with Russia. Now, of course, Russia has clearly taken that to be a green light to go further. We now see the next major escalation from Russia is to bring the North Korean army into the invasion. This has to be a signal to the West that they need to change policy, that NATO leaders need to change policy, that the American leadership needs to change policy, and that the West collectively needs to change policy and adopt far, far tougher policies, far tougher stances towards Russia, which remains the instigator here, which remains the orchestrator of this war, and to show Putin and to show the Russian leadership that the West will take this far more seriously and will take these steps, will not be intimidated by talk of Russian red lines or talk of the need to de-escalate. They need to make that switch urgently, because clearly Russia is escalating, Russia is provoked by Western weakness, and now with North Korea entering the war, we have a wide range of new challenges emerging, and what we're seeing now is just the beginning.
And what about South Korea? We have different rumors that their position to Ukraine aid, military aid, and little aid may change in the future. Are they capable of supplying Ukraine with military packages, with military assistance, in spite of their neighbor being North Korea, in direct proximity of even mega cities in South Korea? So they are basically in the range of ballistic missiles and cannon artillery. Should they be concerned more about themselves, or can they allow, like, sharing their supplies with Ukraine?
Well, South Korea has a very sophisticated and comprehensive military-industrial complex. They have a very well-developed defense industry. So potentially they could become a major partner for Ukraine. We're already seeing South Korea become a more important player in the international defense industry. It's supplying a lot of very important arms to Poland, for example. A number of contracts have been signed recently between between South Korea and Poland. So the South Koreans clearly have the capability to arm Ukraine with very significant weapons. They have the potential to do so. It's really a matter of political will. But I think the South Koreans cannot stand idly by and allow North Korea to become a participant, to join the war in Ukraine, to join the invasion of Ukraine, and do nothing. The North Koreans, as well as gaining technologies directly from Russia in exchange for their participation in the invasion of Ukraine, the North Koreans will also gain very important experience, vital experience of modern warfare, of drone warfare, of electronic warfare, of the use of drones on the battlefield, the use of surveillance drones, the use of attack drones, these sort of practical matters that really are not fully understood by many Western militaries yet. This is where the development of this form of warfare is taking place at a very dynamic rate here in Ukraine. And there really is no substitute for practical experience here. If North Korea gains that experience on the battlefield of Ukraine, let's say over the next 6 months, if North Korean soldiers, North Korean officers and commanders become familiar with the ways in which the war is being fought, the roles being played by drone technologies and electronic warfare, blocking technologies and so forth, there is a good chance that they will then look to use that against other opponents, against their own enemies. Now, what would that mean? That would mean almost inevitably that North Korea would turn these newly learned skills against the South Koreans, perhaps, maybe not in a full-scale traditional conventional war, maybe in some form of hybrid attacks, but it certainly would give North Korea some very significant military advantages over the South Koreans. Now, I don't think South Korea can allow that to happen. So, at a bare minimum, they need to be in Ukraine as well, gaining similar experience. They need to be in Ukraine helping the Ukrainians defeat the North Koreans, and they need to be in Ukraine arming the Ukrainians to make sure that the Ukrainians do succeed in the defense of the country and the defeat of these North Korean troops.
Let's hope for that. And South Korea is an active defense partner of Poland. But you know that the defense cooperation between Ukraine and Poland has been really tense for the last a couple of months, I believe, or even a year. Maybe you have some prognosis. What will happen next? Just your opinion. And the finalizing question, what will happen next on the front line? Because we see the rolling advance of Russians. The Kursk operation is intensifying too, with entire settlements in Russia being ripped off the face of the earth by the Russian army. What do you think will happen next?
Well, everything depends on the outcome of the elections in America. This is the crucial issue now. I think that everybody, be it the Ukraine's political and military leaders are looking to Washington, looking to America. So is the whole of Europe. So are the Russians. So much now hinges on the outcome of this election. That will be it will shape. It won't necessarily decide the final outcome of the war in Ukraine, of the Russian invasion, but it will define the future developments that we're going to see. I think certainly if we look at specifically at the involvement of North Korea, I think one of the reasons why the West has been so slow to react is because the current American administration, the Biden administration, does not want to sound the alarm at this point and does not want to say, look, North Korea is involved in the war, we must take urgent action, because this would be effectively a confession from them. It would be admitting that their policies of escalation management have failed. It would be saying it would be them admitting failure and saying, yes, for almost 3 years now we've followed these policies, and now we see North Korea has entered a European war. So we have failed. So they've been very cautious about doing that. They've been very reluctant to make a lot of noise about North Korea entering the war. Now, once the elections are over, they may be more ready to do that. But at this point, doing so would be handing their opponent, Donald Trump, a very significant advantage, because, of course, he would use that to say, look, Biden has failed, I will not fail. Now it's time for me to take over the leadership of the country and try and win this, perhaps not win the war in terms of how Trump would see it, but certainly do a better job of deterring America's and the West's opponents and enemies. Clearly, with North Korean soldiers fighting in Europe, the Biden administration's policies in that sense have failed.
Well, that makes a lot of sense for me, and I hope for our viewers too. And thank you for being with us, Mr. Dickinson, this evening and regularly. It is very important for us.
Thank you.
Thank you, and have a nice evening. Well, that's all for today. We work for you to be informed, and it is your support that matters for us. Be sure to like and subscribe to our UATV channel. Stay tuned for more, and goodbye.